The city was alive with the hum of traffic, neon lights flickering against rain-soaked streets, and laughter spilling out of warm cafes where people gathered to escape the chill of the evening. Yet, just a few blocks away from the glowing comfort, on a street corner shadowed by tall buildings, sat a girl who seemed invisible to most. Her clothes were tattered, her hair matted from the weather, and her small hands clutched an old violin case. She was only 16, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived lifetimes of pain. Her name was Emily. Emily had once known the comfort of a home, the smell of her mother's cooking, and the sound of her father's laughter filling their tiny living room. But life had turned cruel when both her parents passed away in a car accident 3 years earlier. She had no family willing to take her in, no place she could truly call home. She bounced from shelter to shelter, sometimes sleeping under bridges, sometimes in abandoned buildings, but most often on the streets. The violin was the only thing her parents had left her, a worn instrument her father had saved up for and given to her on her 10th birthday. He had told her then, "Music can feed the soul, Emily, and one day, maybe it will feed you too." At the time, she had laughed at the odd words, but now they echoed in her heart like prophecy. Tonight, hunger gnawed at her stomach like a beast. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, save for a bruised apple someone had tossed aside. Her hands trembled as she opened the violin case, not just from cold but from nerves. Across the street, a crowd had gathered outside a popular restaurant. The diners inside laughed, their plates filled with food Emily could only dream of. She swallowed her fear and walked closer, her violin clutched against her chest. "Excuse me," she said softly to a group of young people standing in line. They were well-dressed, faces lit by phone screens in the glow of the restaurant's sign. Can I play for food?" At first, they didn't hear her. Then one of them, a tall boy in an expensive jacket, turned. "What?" he asked, a smirk already tugging at his lips. Emily's voice shook. "I don't want money. I'm hungry. I can play the violin. If you let me play, maybe someone could give me food." The group erupted in laughter. A girl with perfect makeup covered her mouth, trying to suppress her giggles, but the cruelty in her eyes was unmistakable. Another boy snickered. "What is this? America's Got Talent homeless edition." They laughed harder, their voices cutting into Emily's fragile spirit like knives. Emily lowered her eyes, fighting back tears. She had expected rejection, maybe silence, but the mockery stung deeper than she could have prepared for. She turned slightly, ready to walk away, when the boy in the jacket called out, "Go ahead then. Play us a song. If it's good, maybe we'll throw you a French fry or two." The group cackled again, but Emily's hands tightened around her violin. She could leave, run away from the humiliation. But something inside her, a quiet strength born from all the pain she had endured, urged her to stay. She raised the violin to her shoulder, closed her eyes, and drew the bow across the strings. At first, the sound was soft trembling, as though the violin too was shivering in the cold night. The laughter continued for a moment, until Emily found her rhythm. And then something miraculous happened. The melody that poured from her violin was not of this world. It was a song of sorrow and hope, of loss and resilience. Every note carried the story of her parents, the nights she had cried herself to sleep, the hunger she endured, and the tiny spark of hope she never let die. It was hauntingly beautiful. The chaotic streets seemed to quiet, as if the city itself paused to listen. The laughter of the group faded into stunned silence. Inside the restaurant, conversation slowed. People turned to the windows, drawn to the music outside. The restaurant staff paused, their trays suspended midair. Passers-by stopped walking, captivated by the sound of a girl's soul pouring out through an old violin. Emily's eyes remained closed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she played. She wasn't just performing. She was speaking in the only language she truly knew anymore, the language of music. And that music reached into hearts that had grown numb, hearts that had forgotten compassion. When she finished, the last note lingered in the air like a prayer. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, unexpectedly, someone began to clap. Another joined. Soon, the entire street corner erupted in applause. Strangers who had never noticed her before were now wiping tears from their eyes. Even the group who had mocked her stood frozen, their laughter replaced by shame. The tall boy who had taunted her looked down at the ground, unable to meet her gaze. The girl with perfect makeup bit her lip, her eyes shimmering with something close to guilt. Emily lowered her violin slowly, clutching it to her chest as though it were her lifeline. And then something even more extraordinary happened. A man stepped out from the restaurant, holding a bag of food. He walked over to Emily and gently placed it in her hands. "This is for you," he said softly. His voice cracked, as if he too was on the verge of tears. "And thank you. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Emily blinked, overwhelmed, whispering a thank you so faint it was barely audible. But soon, others followed. A woman came forward with more food, someone else slipped money into her violin case, and within minutes Emily had enough to eat for days. The group of young people who had mocked her slowly stepped closer. The tall boy cleared his throat awkwardly. "I am sorry," he muttered, his voice shaky. "We shouldn't have laughed. That was incredible." Emily looked at him, her eyes weary but kind. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her music had already spoken forgiveness. As the crowd began to disperse, people whispered to one another about the homeless girl with the violin who had turned laughter into tears, cruelty into compassion. And for the first time in years, Emily felt something stir inside her. Hope. Hope that maybe kindness wasn't dead, that maybe her music could still light the darkest corners of the world. That night, as she ate her first warm meal in days, Emily thought of her father's words, "Music can feed the soul, Emily. And one day, maybe it will feed you too." She realized he had been right all along. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The world had just caught a glimpse of her gift, and her story was about to unfold in ways she could never imagine.